Hello and welcome to Clickbait, and well, it's happy and perhaps sad news today because, well, sad news first. Fuji are killing off perhaps the best kit lens in history, the 1855 f2.8-f4. Well, they call it a kit lens, but this thing is so much more. That's the sad news. The good news is, of course, that they can't just leave that spot empty. There's going to be a new one. This has been on the market for about 12 years or so now, which is pretty ancient in terms of, well, mirrorless camera technology, so maybe it is high time something replaced at the new 16-50 f2.8-f4. Well, good things are promised, I'm sure, but this has been something of an epoch-defining lens because, well, let's face it, most camera manufacturers, when they offer you a kit lens, it's really just something to get you out of the box and start shooting. They don't really want you to use it more than a couple of times because they want you to go and buy something else to replace it. Fuji, well, they think different. They don't think the same way that other manufacturers do. They are a very different brand. Case in point, this is my Nikon Z30, which I shoot an awful lot of my YouTube videos on. I'm currently shooting on the Z6 II because I wanted to use an f2.8 lens and be a bit closer, and this is a not full frame camera. So anyway, this though is the 16-50 pancake lens that came with this particular camera. It has a little bit of a grind to it now because it has been quite heavily abused. This is not a great lens by any means at all. Maybe I'll do a review on it one day. Probably I won't. This is the kind of lens I don't care about. If I'm doing a workshop video on the car channel and, as you can see, it gets welding and grinding splatter on the front element, I'm not that upset. If that had happened to this lens, or to the lens you're looking at me through right now, I'd have been very upset indeed. This though, semi-disposable in a way. But this is how most manufacturers think. They assume that the kit lens is either going to be because you're not really that into photography, you just want a basic take a photo and be happy with it forever kind of thing, or you're a serious photographer, you're never going to use it and take it out of the box, or it's going straight on eBay so you don't really care. Fuji though take the attitude that if they give you a really good lens straight away, you're going to fall in love with that lens and that camera, and you're going to be hooked into their system pretty much immediately, and that means you're going to be more of a loyal customer. You're going to buy more cameras and more lenses, not replacing this one but supplementing it. You're going to find that, yeah, it's good, but it's not quite long enough, or it's not quite wide enough, or whatever else you're going to be planning on doing. So you'll then supplement it with your prime lenses and whatever else. So you're not going to wind up hating this lens, you're going to love it. And I've had this lens for as long as I've had this X-T20, which is quite a few years, and sure, I have supplemented it with some prime lenses, but I've never felt the need to replace it because this is, well, for the stuff I use the X-T20 for, as good as I need. But anyway, let's have a look at what this thing is and some examples of how good this thing is, because now this is going, there's going to be a lot of these going cheap because a lot of people are going to be replacing them with the new 1650. So let's grab my notes and fact you up. So first of all, the full name is the XF 18-55 f2.8-f4 LM-OIS. That's a lot of words for a small lens, and it is very, very small indeed. It's 65 by 70 millimeters. That's dinky. It's a little bigger here because it's got a polarizing filter and a lens hood on there. The largest apertures are, of course, f2.8 at 18 millimeters and f4 at 55, and its smallest is f22. It has an all-metal body, so it feels really solid, really well constructed. It's got that kind of tactile quality that makes you want to use something. If something feels cheap and plastic, you're not going to want to use it. You're going to move on and try and do something else. This thing makes you want to make it part of your everyday kit. And also, it makes it feel like it's not going to break as well, and to be fair, it hasn't. Inside, this thing has got, well, some clever stuff going on. An extra low dispersion element to reduce colour fringing and chromatic aberrations, and that's easy for you to say. It's got 3 spherical elements to control distortion and improve sharpness. It is very sharp. It's got a super EBC coating, I don't know what that means, to reduce lens flare, and the autofocus has a linear motor, so it's internal focusing and nearly silent in operation, which is a good thing, especially if you're shooting video or doing street photography and trying to be discreet. There's a couple of little controls down here, so you can choose whether to have the aperture ring as aperture or not, and you've got the on-off for the optical image stabilization. It's got 4 stops of OIS, so you can handhold at pretty low shutter speeds. And the fact it's 310 grams, you might think that's quite heavy for a small lens like that, but it's a lot of glass and a lot of metal. That actually kind of does help you stand a little bit more steady. There's a little bit less bounce and flex in there when you're holding the thing up. I like that, that's good. Incidentally, there are 14 elements in 10 groups inside this thing. And from an actual use point of view, it's got a 58mm thread for the filter on the front, and it's got a 7-blade diaphragm, so it's got pretty, not perfect bokeh, but pretty good bokeh. Well, for a zoom lens, it's quite impressive. So generally the specs look really, really good. But is it any good? Well, yes, it actually is. So this thing is actually very, very nice to use. I'll pop off the hood and this filter so you can actually see it a little bit more clearly. The front element is really quite big and very, very bright. The zoom ring is very smooth indeed, and it's only about a quarter turn from full wide to full telephoto. In front of that it is quite narrow, but you do have a manual focus ring, and behind that you've got an aperture ring also, so you can take full manual control if you want to. It is a very compact thing really. I mean, that is absolutely tiny and fitting inside the palm of your hand, but the weight of it, 310 grams, it's, yeah, well, it's quite a chunky thing. Feels like you could probably wallop someone with that. This is of course the beauty of the Micro Four Thirds system. Of course, what you want to know about really, as well as, well, what it's like to use, is what does it actually produce? And well, it is a beautiful lens, as you can see here. Let's start with the London scene up top. This is a long exposure down by the river, but you can see we've got nice crisp stones here at the foreground, and we've got the shard, still pretty sharp, down the back, and the bridge sharp in the middle as well. Now, something I think it is probably fairly safe to say is that you are generally optimised for sharpness more in the centre than at the edges if you've opened it wider than say a 5.6. If you're at f2.8 and fully wide, you might notice a little bit of drop off in the sharpness around the edges. The speed and accuracy of the focusing is very good, although that is very much down to the camera. I kind of feel that with the X-T20 the lens has got more to give than the camera can push it to. I feel like if the camera could lock on and choose where to focus to more quickly, the lens could certainly get that into focus faster than it currently is on the X-T20. But looking through some of these pictures here, we can see we've got a lot of sharp area and a lot of nice definition. And this I think is fairly wide, and there's not much in the way of distortion. I did notice if you go fully wide, where was a fully wide shot? I did notice on an image where it's fully as wide as it'll go, 18mm, and a very square, even thing in front of the camera, there is a certain amount of distortion across left to right, but generally you don't really notice it too much. And of course, being Fuji, you do have that amazing colour rendition, the fact it just picks out the colours and just throws them in your face. Again, that's down to the camera quite a lot, but the lens does play a part of that. Overall, it is a really, really nice lens. Now, new, this lens has been £700, £699 basically, including VAT. I think it's a similar price in dollars in the States. The replacement lens is weighing in apparently at the same price point, $699. But you can pick these things up for pretty cheap. I've seen them going for £250 or so. So is this not only the best kit lens ever made, is this the best bargain lens ever made? Well, now the replacement's on the way, you know what, it actually might be. This is such a versatile lens, it's such a useful focal length to just walk around with day to day. It's kind of the perfect lens to take you from, well, some landscape photography, some city photography, through to a bit of street photography. It does everything, and it does everything very well. And if you can pick one up for about £200 to £300, your Fuji X camera will love you, and you will love your X camera a little bit more. Yes, this is the best kit lens I think anyone has ever made, and I'm very, very sad to say it's being discontinued. But the good news is the 1650, well, that's going to be even better, isn't it? Hopefully. Go and grab yourself one while they're cheap. Thanks for watching.